Hey guys, Lit Sports Online back at you here, and we got a UFC 229 preview. This is, of course, the event that has Khabib versus McGregor for the lightweight title, and it's going to be on Saturday, October 6th of 2018. We're going to break down the entire main card, but of course also mostly talk about the McGregor fight. We're starting off with a main card fight of Michelle Waterson versus Felice Herrig.
Yeah, so this is a fun fight between two women who have been a staple of that division for quite a while now. Michelle Waterson, the karate hottie, it was a kind of that woman that always gets to that number one contender fight and kind of falls short. Her last time out was against Rose Namajunas, the current champion, and she unfortunately ate a head kick in that one. And Felice Herrig is a woman who's, like I said, been a staple of the division, but has kind of always been like middle of the pack. Got to that number one or two contender fight and kind of always fell back a little bit, but two very fun strikers with very different styles. Michelle Waterson is karate, Felice Herrig is kind of a Muay Thai fighter, so it should be a really fun stand-up fight in my estimation, and one that should be a very entertaining way to open up this main card.
Okay, and then we also have Derek Lewis against Alexander Volkov. What can you tell us about this one?
Yeah, so this is a heavyweight fight against two of the top 5 ranked heavyweight contenders, and they're both kind of sluggers. It kind of guarantees to be a fun fight, which I say with a little bit of hesitation because I said that about Derek Lewis's last fight. You know, him versus Francis Ngannou, a guy who's known for punching people's heads into orbit, and it was the worst fight in heavyweight history with like 4 total strikes thrown over 5 rounds or 3 rounds or whatever it was. But this fight should be more fun. Derek Lewis hopefully isn't coming in off an injury like he was last time, and it should just be 2 heavyweights slugging it out and leaving it all in the cage. You know?
I'm going to make a prediction on that one and say it ends within like the first 30 seconds. I just got a feeling about that fight.
The first 30 seconds? Right.
I think it's going to be one of those where like they just come out and like a dude's knocked down by like the first couple seconds. I just got a feeling.
Very possible. I mean, there are 2 guys that weigh 240 plus pounds just trying to hit each other. Somebody's going down at some point.
I don't see a decision on that fight.
Me neither.
Next we have OSP against Dominic Reyes.
Yeah, OSP versus Dominic Reyes, and I think that the UFC purposefully stacked this card with strikers. They said, you know, we're going to have McGregor at the top. We might as well fill it with a bunch of exciting fights. OSP, a guy who, again, light heavyweight division, is a slugger. He's a guy who likes to throw big shots, uses his takedowns a little bit. He has a couple submissions in the UFC, but a lot of the time he likes to fight standing. We saw him fight John Jones for the interim title after John Jones came back from suspension, and he's a guy who, again, is kind of in that same situation where he gets to the number one contender fight or gets close to winning that title and just never quite pulls it off. And Dominic Reyes is a guy that's kind of been coming up a little bit, so it's going to be exciting to see where this goes. It's a guy who's been near the top for a while versus a guy who's trying to get there. And so those are always fun fights to see because it's kind of a crossroads. You know, it's one guy who might be slipping downwards and one guy who's clawing his way up. So promises to be a fun fight to watch at the very least.
What do you make of the undefeated record of Reyes? I mean, was he going up against that good of competition, or does that not really mean much for this?
Yeah, I mean, in MMA, you don't really see as much like you do in boxing, right, where they have a padded record. In boxing, a lot of guys will, if a guy looks like he's going to be really good, they will put him up against, you know, tomato cans and stuff and kind of pad his record to get him up and build his confidence and build him up. In boxing, the undefeated record is this like holy grail. It means a lot. In MMA, it doesn't mean that much. I mean, it does if you get to the point where you're fighting for a title, like you got your Khabib Nurmagomedov in the main event, who is like 26-0 right now. That's insanity. But it doesn't necessarily mean if you're not undefeated that you can't be one of the biggest fighters of all time. Conor McGregor, for example, has 2 losses on his record, I think, maybe 3. I think he's 2 losses, 1 draw. It doesn't matter. But like I said, it doesn't matter if you have losses on your record, but it is that rarefied air that you breathe when you do get to the top and you still have that undefeated record. And I think this is going to be a very, very tough spot for Dominic Reyes to keep that undefeated record. I do think it means something for sure, especially because he's not a newcomer to the UFC in this fight. But we'll see how it plays out.
Okay. And next we have a fight, Tony Ferguson versus Anthony Pettis. This could end up deciding who's going to fight the champion of the lightweight division.
Yeah, so I like when the UFC does this. They have the title fight at the main event of a card, and the co-main event they have the number one contender fight from that same division, which is a fun thing to do in a couple ways, right? First, it's almost like you get to see this like fun little tournament to see who's going to fight next. It's like a 4-man tournament basically, and the two winners are going to fight. Second, it's just a good move on their part because, God forbid, you get an injury and somebody has to pull out of the fight, which we have seen Tony Ferguson do a couple times. We've seen Khabib pull out a couple times. So it's a good move in those two different ways. But this fight is very intriguing to me. Anthony Pettis is a former champion of the lightweight division, former number one contender of the featherweight division at 145, 10 pounds south of where he is now. And he's one of those guys who, again, is such a big name and has such great potential that we all are aware of, that he is always 1 or 2 fights away from a title. He can be on a 2 or 3 fight losing streak and then come out and look phenomenal against 2 guys and get a title shot, even though he's only won 2 of his last 5 fights. And he looked great in his last fight. He came out and submitted Michael Chiesa, who, that was one of those fights where you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, Anthony Pettis is known for being a devastating striker and Chiesa is known for being a really phenomenal grappler, and so conventional wisdom would tell you if it goes to the ground, Chiesa might have the upper hand, but Pettis came out and submitted him. And then he's fighting Tony Ferguson, who very well could be the best lightweight in the world. He's the former interim champion. He got stripped because he got injured, and then they stripped Ferguson, they stripped McGregor, then Khabib fought Ali Quinta for the title, and it's all crazy. But Tony Ferguson is sort of a belt holder right now. He just got stripped of his interim title not too long ago, and he is phenomenal. He's a 10th planet black belt under Eddie Bravo. He's a crazy striker. This last fight out, we saw him dominate RDA, Rafael dos Anjos, and one of the most impressive performances I've seen in a long time. And I think that regardless of who wins the main event, if they're fighting Tony Ferguson, they're in for some trouble. I think that Tony Ferguson is the most dynamic, dangerous fighter in the lightweight division right now, and I think that he should be fighting for a title right now. I think that McGregor really kind of threw a wrench into this whole division, but he's the cash cow, so he can do whatever the hell he wants. But I think Tony Ferguson is almost a shoo-in to hold the title at some point in the pretty near future.
Okay. So then, of course, that brings us to the main event of the night, Khabib and McGregor.
Yes.
And what should be one of those classic matchups of a grappler versus a striker. And I mean, what are your initial thoughts on it?
I mean, that is the initial thought, right? Is that the as close as you're going to get to your classic grappler versus striker, kind of old school, what style is the best type of fight, you know? And that's the conventional wisdom on this, but obviously they're both well-rounded guys. They both know everything, but I'd say that they each have a very, very strong point that is quite obviously their opponent's weak point. So it's kind of a question for me of who can enforce who can force their game plan on the other guy. It really is going to come down to, in my mind, it comes down to the footwork of McGregor versus the tenacious takedowns of Khabib. But it's a real interesting one because when you look at somebody like McGregor, who has really, really good footwork, is really good at cutting the angles, is really good at staying on the outside, he's really good at holding that range with his kicks. His kicks aren't super powerful, but he throws a lot of them, and he throws diverse kicks, and it keeps you on the outside of that striking range. And then he just has a really crisp, really accurate, and quick boxing game, where he's able to kind of sneak in on people.
So for McGregor, does he want to make this fight so that, I'm guessing he doesn't want to really go to the ground with this guy. He wants to keep it a stand-up fight?
Yes, for sure. I think that if you look at the ways that this fight can end, I think quite obviously there's three ways, right? Finish for McGregor, finish for Khabib, or decision. I think two of those lean to Khabib. I don't think McGregor is going to be winning a decision against Khabib. I don't think that McGregor can be in there for 25 minutes and keep Khabib off of him long enough to not be giving up just octagon control time and control of the fight to Khabib for extended periods of time. I think that if it goes to a decision, I'm pretty positive it's going to be a decision for Khabib. He's the best in the world at getting someone down and just holding them there and inflicting damage consistently. So at this level in MMA, you typically see, like, even with a very good wrestler, it typically takes all of your focus to control a top-level fighter on the ground, like somebody like a Michael Johnson or an Edson Barboza or a Rafael dos Anjos. Those guys are a handful anywhere in the fight. On the bottom, if they're defending from the bottom, they're a handful and they're constantly active. But Khabib is able to control people with one hand and just non-stop throw shots with the other hand. And that's kind of unheard of at this level. You don't see people controlling a professional #1 contender with one arm to the point where they can't even defend themselves that well. But you see that from Khabib, which is very troubling for McGregor, because if there's any weak point for McGregor, it's his grappling.
Yeah, I mean, McGregor's going to have to be on his top game for this one. I mean, just looking at Khabib, I mean, first of all, the guy's undefeated in MMA. And on top of that, if you look at through the way he's finished his matches, you know, he's 31% knockout TKO, 31% submission, 38% decision, and that just tells me he's got many aspects to his game. He can win in a lot of different ways, whereas McGregor, it's 86% knockouts. So he's really just a guy that's going for the knockout all the time. Question is, can he get it against a guy that's undefeated and the champion? That's the big question.
Yeah, and that is a very good question. So you see those stats and you look at Khabib and you say, wow, this guy's very well-rounded. And while that is true, yes, I think that we have seen, if there's one hole in his game, it is McGregor's biggest strength, which is the striking game, particularly a straight left. So we saw the one time before the Al Iaquinta fight that Khabib looked human was when we saw him fight Michael Johnson, who was a southpaw like McGregor, and landed a straight left on Khabib and stunned him for a second. So much so that Khabib's first reaction, he went to his gut instincts and immediately went for the takedown, immediately got himself out of that situation where he was even going to be possibly eating that left hand again, and then took over the fight from there. But it's interesting to me that we see that one little thing is McGregor's biggest weapon, right? And it's also interesting to me that while Khabib is one of the best wrestlers in the game, hands down, his takedown game isn't as explosive and strong as some of the other guys we've seen. So you're going to see, like, you'll see like a Chad Mendez or like a Tyron Woodley or some of those huge wrestler guys who have a really strong, like, blast double or a really strong takedown game. While Khabib is really phenomenal at, once he gets you there, he's really phenomenal at controlling you, inflicting damage, setting you up for a submission. He doesn't have the strong takedown game like a lot of the American wrestlers do. And so that, to me, is going to be the key. Is most of the time when you see Khabib get somebody down, he kind of gets him into the clinch, he gets him into like a dirty boxing kind of situation, and then drags them to the ground. And McGregor's phenomenal at staying out of those situations. He's phenomenal at cutting the angle. He's phenomenal at using his footwork to get right out of the direct path of a takedown or a rush. And that's where he lands those big shots. He's the best counter striker we've seen in MMA in quite some time, where you see Aldo rushes forward. He very slightly cuts that angle to the left, lands that straight left on the jaw, puts Aldo out in 13 seconds. Aldo, one of the greatest fighters in MMA history. And so for me, it really comes down to, is Khabib able to close the distance and make it a dirty fight and drag Conor to the ground and either put him out there or just take him down and hold him down for the end of the round every round? Or does McGregor's phenomenal distance control and knowledge of the striking game and just power in his shots, is that too much for Khabib to handle in order to get inside to enforce his game? And it really is a toss-up. I have no idea what's going to happen.
So bottom line, if McGregor can keep the vast majority of this fight standing up, you think he's going to be able to win it?
Yes. I think that in the amount of stand-up that we saw in the Ally Aquinta fight against Khabib, it was pretty clear that Khabib is not an elite striker in MMA. And McGregor is the elite of the elite strikers in MMA. He's any division, he's right there. The same could be said about Khabib's wrestling. So it's, while both guys are very good at striking and wrestling in all aspects, they are both far and away one of the best at each of their individual strengths. So it's a really interesting fight. McGregor can grapple, yes, for sure. He's training with Dylan Dennis, one of the best grapplers in the world. Khabib can strike, for sure. He trains with Daniel Cormier and Luke Rockhold and Cain Velasquez. I mean, he's under Javier Mendez. He doesn't not know how to strike, but they're like the gap that both of them have over the other in those individual disciplines is very, very vast, I think. So for me, this fight almost comes down to like the mental game, right? Obviously, McGregor is known for his brash attitude, and he's larger than life, and he's just constantly in your face, and just super confident in all of the lead up and all the stuff outside of the fight. And then even when you get to the fight, he's so composed that it's weird, especially when you look at his attitude and his personality outside of the fight. You see him in the octagon, you would expect kind of the same crazy kind of deal, but then he gets in there and he is just dead face, just dead behind the eyes, like looks like shark eyes, you know. He has no soul, and he just sits there and just waits for you to walk into his fist. And then Khabib is just as confident, if not more, just the exact opposite. He's the quiet, reserved, just he doesn't have to do anything because he knows that he's going to go in there and he's going to pound you into the floor. They're both so confident that they talk shit to their opponents in the octagon. Like, you know how comfortable you have to be to just constantly talk shit to people while you're in a fist fight in front of millions of fans? I mean, that's absurd.
I mean, hey, I've seen a few fights where someone does that, like tries to be cocky and gets knocked the fuck out. So I mean,
yeah, exactly. Like, you have to, like, that is some strong mind games to be talking smack to somebody who you know is getting paid $1 million to come up and punch you in the face. Who do you think's gonna win? If you had to call it.
I'm going to say Conor McGregor, just because now that I'm thinking more about it, I think his takedown defense is going to be good enough that he's not spending a lot of time grappling on the ground. And I think that, like you said, that striking advantage will come into play for him. But, I mean, it's tough to say, because I also look at the fact that Conor's been away from MMA for a while. And
2 years.
Yeah, you wondered, is that going to affect him? But then again, I think back to that one fight with, what was it, George St. Pierre, where he was out a long time, came back and won. So it is possible. It's possible to come back after a while and still, because they're training, you know?
Yeah, they're always training, right? And another big aspect of this fight is going to be the conditioning. We've seen both of these guys get tired and all this stuff, but yeah, it's certainly interesting. And I'm a fan of the kind of the shooting star of Conor McGregor. You know, I want to see how crazy he can get with it. I want to see if he can get so big he talks the UFC into giving him part ownership, like he's been talking about for years. He already has it to the point where he is co-promoting the fight and is one of the main sponsors with his brand of whiskey, Proper 12, on the canvas. So I want to see him win again and take it from there. But if I'm voting with money-wise, I'm going to put some money on Khabib.
Okay, so there you have it. Should be a very interesting fight and a very interesting pay-per-view in general. Hope you enjoyed the preview. Make sure to like and subscribe. Stay tuned.
Sexy, guys.
Great job, guys.
I laughed, I cried,
David
I
Brooks.
swallowed.
Hey guys, Justin and Pat on here. Let's redo that. Is this technically Lit Sports Online still?
It's always lit sport. It's sports. It's lit. It's online.
Okay. Let's redo it.
I mean, come on!
You girls play nice. Alright, UFC bullshit rolling in 5, 4, 3,